Hello, I'm Nico Rosberg. If this show stops at any point, please check your audio player for foreign substances. By which I mean a piece of chewing gum jammed into the mechanism by Lewis Hamilton. Hello, welcome to On Speed. I'm Gareth Jones, he's Richard Porter, he's Zog, and is that the fastest ever opening to the show?
It's so fast, you've completely caught us out. We were supposed to say hello or something. But...
Hello.
Hello, guys. This weekend, not only have we got Suzuka, but we've got the Paris Motor Show just out of reach, just a 45-minute train journey away, and we didn't go.
What, Suzuka goes to Paris? 45 minutes?
What kind of mad monorail have you got?
Sorry, I was in the future then, wasn't I? No, yeah. Actually, how long is it? 2 hours to Paris, isn't it? Should be 45 minutes. This is the 21st century.
I remember the last time I went to Paris for the motor show. In fact, I drove and almost instantly regretted it. Because in my head, once you get off the tunnel train,
you're on the
Calais,
you're
sort of, well, you're there. I don't know why I thought that. Calais is miles away. And that bit of France, between Calais and the outskirts of Paris...
It's full of immigrants, you've got to drive through them.
I wish there had been some kind of attempt to get onto the chassis of my car, because it was otherwise, it was really boring. It's just very flat, and the roads are very empty. And I was sticking to the speed limit because... I know that the gendarmes stop you and want an on-the-spot fine, and if you don't have the money on you, they will frog march you to a cash machine.
You can't say frog march.
I mean it like that.
I
meant it in the actual sense of that word. I've witnessed
this happening.
Have you?
I can give no more details.
This correct. Okay. Neither can I.
Oh, yeah.
We both witnessed this happening.
Yes. So, yeah, and I didn't have any cash on me. Eventually, I was so bored, I stopped at Motor Services, got a load of cash out of the machine, and then ragged it the rest of the way, because I just thought, I'd rather be stopped and take my chances that I won't be, which I wasn't, and just get there. And then got into Paris, and it sort of took like 2 hours to do 2 miles across the city because the traffic is terrible. So my advice, always get the Eurostar if you happen to be travelling from London to Paris.
Right. We were there 2 years ago at the same time.
Other train services are available. Actually, no, they're not
from Paris. No. Well, there are.
And don't fly, because flying, the plane actually does a sort of big pyramid. It just goes up to its cruising height and then drops straight back down again.
Spends about 2 minutes there and then starts its descent.
You could throw the plane at Paris from Heathrow. Anyway, where were we?
If you were
somewhere between London and Paris, I think. Yeah. But we didn't go this year because you made a gag about this on Sniff Petrol rather brilliantly, I thought. Do we really need to go to motor shows anymore? Because it all happens online beforehand, a bit like Hyundai. Have you read about this week? Hyundai have launched online buy your Hyundai service. Yeah. They're going to have a shop
they've got kind of one of those configurator things online?
Yeah.
Is that what they're doing?
And you'll have your car.
Good for them.
But they're also going to have a physical world presence at some big shopping centre. So you go there, you look, but you don't buy it, you go and buy it online. It's rather like the Currys model.
Yeah, well, it's like the way people buy everything now. You go to a shop, you have a little look at it, and then you go home and order it off Amazon or similar. Yeah. So why not?
The analogy here is the motor show. You don't even need to go to the motor show, just do it all online. But there are some fantastic cars. You mentioned that Ford are having a bit of a blitz. Do Ford have a blitz or do VW have a blitz?
Best not to go there, I think.
Yeah,
but
I think
Ford are announcing... well, this is the problem, you see. They've already announced. We can tell you all about these cars because they've already released full details and pictures, which is one reason why it seems like, certainly as a member of the press, going to a motor show is really just an excuse to go on a bit of a sort of long walk around a distant exhibition centre and get achy feet and then go to a hotel and get drunk with some people that you occasionally see.
And in all seriousness,
I'm speaking purely as a freeloader.
A motor show, my perception is that it's increasingly more focused on being industry events, which they always have been, than something that reaches out a bit to the general public, I think.
Well, yeah, but you've got to remember, because you see all this big hurrah about the motor show, and press day for Paris will last for a couple of days, and it'll be in all of the car media. It'll probably even make some of the national papers for some of the cars that are on display. It's very easy to forget that show then goes on for 2 weeks afterwards as a public event. There are probably lots of people in Paris and the surrounding area who will go to the show because they're thinking maybe of buying a new car and they want to go and sit in a load of things as a one-stop shop. Yeah. But, truth be told, motor shows are really, really busy a lot of the time. And you just want to sit in stuff you'd never normally get to sit in. But now that a lot of car showrooms are on strips where there's all the different makes next to each other, you could spend an afternoon doing that if you just had an idle Thursday. And you wouldn't have to wait to go and sit in all the tasty stuff. You just put on a reasonably smart pair of shoes and you could probably even get a sit in an Aston or something like that. So I don't know whether it has that much value for the public. I suppose it probably does, but certainly for journalists and for the press, it sort of feels like there's no big surprise. You're not going there to suddenly file copy. I think there's two things that journalists still do, and the reason they go to motor shows is to go and interview senior people because they're all there.
But face to face with people.
A PR bloke from a big car company I was talking to on Twitter this week, and he said that if you look at the crowds around the press conferences at motor shows, it's all the senior management from other car companies. Like, a lot of the journalists can't even be bothered, because also the press conferences overlap. It's a nightmare. You can't possibly be at all of them.
Yeah.
And
it's
what
like
you're doing...
Glastonbury, isn't it? In that
you're having to make a schedule. Well, they do. The grown-ups, proper journalists who do this right, they make a schedule of where they've got to go, where they've got to speak to people. But also because it's ridiculous going through the motions. You'll see the chief executive of the company will come up and he'll give a big preamble. They're usually using words like premium and expansion and it's all. You could just write it yourself.
Consolidation.
And then he'll pull the covers off a car you've already seen pictures of 3 weeks ago. And it just feels like everyone's going through the motions. Something's got to change, because it is all rather ridiculous in a way.
And it's very expensive to put on the kind of show at those shows that the big manufacturers do.
Yeah.
You know, it's not
cheap at all.
Business.
No. So anyway, people indulging in not cheapness this week does involve Ford as well. So Ford are showing off for the first time in public the new S-Max.
Hang on. Yep.
Oh,
that's one person who's excited about it. No, I know, and it is. To be fair, it's a
so happy to have a new one.
It is a pretty good vehicle.
I think,
it's not exciting, but it works.
I can see what they've done. They've tried to make it just look like an evolution of the old one, because the old one was very successful for them. So they don't want to throw away that. But I don't find it particularly interesting or exciting. Well, in a way that when the original one came out, you sort of went, ooh, a kind of low-slung people carrier.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's see how this works out for them. Worked out very well. And they were drawing customers from BMW and Merc and all sorts. It was the first Ford that really sort of punched above its weight. I think they were selling something like 75% of them were top spec. Yeah. Because they were pulling in people who got more money than the car cost.
Yeah.
And that's quite unusual.
Yeah, Ford were getting, what do they call it? A new customer. There's a word, isn't there? For
acquisition?
Possibly, that would do.
Alan. They sometimes call a new customer Alan. If his name is Alan, they would call him that.
Yeah, that would work, yeah.
That's good customer service.
Yeah, the S-Max pulled in, I almost had the new territory. No, what's the word? It'll come to me in a minute. There's a great word for it. But they pulled in new customers from other brands who are buying stuff like BMWs. And
Conquest, is that what you're
Conquest,
thinking
of? Conquest, that'll do. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, Conquest sales. Well done, the S-Max, for doing that. And what I was interested in is that the new S-Max is going to be available for the first time with a four-wheel drive option. Hooray for that. Not that any of us need four-wheel drive most of the time.
This is something I'm curious about. Have you noticed how many BMWs, now they've started selling a four-wheel drive option on the 3 Series, particularly over here, and you just get a little badge on the boot lid on the left that says X-Drive. Have you noticed how many of those you see around? I'm talking about in London. What are these people doing?
It would make sense if you had a range of cars which were front-wheel drive and they were diesel and they produced so much torque that the front-wheel drive version was virtually undrivable. And so the only way they could make it work was by having a four-wheel drive version. But BMW, who are all bloody rear-wheel drive, apart from the new Active... Not Tourer.
Yes.
Active Yogurt, yes. I don't see the sense in it.
No, I don't. I'm curious about this. Anyway, we digress.
But the S-Max being four-wheel drive, I think is really good. I think that'll do some conquest sales from people who would have gone for a 4x4. But I hope they're going to use it in a sort of a Quattro-esque kind of way, just to get the power down, just to make it a driver's car that the S-Max is supposed to be, aspires to be.
Well,
but how can you make that kind of vehicle a driver's vehicle?
By making it better to drive than the equivalent other cars in that category.
I think it's rather like making the Cayenne. It's an exercise you shouldn't bother with.
Well, if you've got...
I don't think.
If you've got a family and you have to drive them round in that car, and you do that a lot of the time, you're not going to drive it like a driver's car. You're just going to use it as a slow, gentle, soft, safe thing. But if there are occasions when you and your mate are off to Le Mans, or you're doing a business trip, or you're going to collect grandma from the other side of the country, you want to be able to get some satisfaction out of driving it.
So buy a cheap sports car.
But then you can't own two cars. The idea is to have one, and it's a Ford.
But then it has to compromise between these different things, and that offends the purist in me.
Compromise is the devil talking. Kevin Rowland, 1985.
I stand by my defence of purity in design.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
You're a
kind of agree with you. So I think a big practical car that tries to be sporty, it's always going to be compromised.
Yeah.
What's the point? It'd be much better if it was comfortable in its own skin, as just quite comfortable, quite easy to drive. I mean, that's the thing. What the old S-Max did was it was pleasant to drive. I would never in a million years call it sporty, but it did that thing that modern Fords do, where the steering was well weighted and well geared, and the gear shift was slick, and it had a good chassis on it.
You were pleasantly surprised by it when you got in and drove it.
Any more sporty would just be idiotic. I think it's going to be business as usual there with the S-Max. The other thing I think will be at Paris is finally, the actual version you can buy of the new Mondeo, which has been coming for 3 years now. And it's been on sale in the US for 3 years. I was in the US earlier in the year, and they're bloody everywhere. Usually the hybrid versions.
But
it's called the Fusion over there.
I mean,
they have problems with quality control, as I understand.
Yeah, I think it's a two-pronged problem. The quality control, perhaps. This was developed in the US. You know, all Fords now are developed somewhere, but for the whole world. So the Fiesta and the Focus and stuff are done in Europe. But the Mondeo was done in the US and perhaps wasn't quite to the liking of the European operation in some ways, because what is necessarily good for the US market isn't quite work here sometimes. The other problem is that they were going to build it in the Genk factory in Belgium, and now that's closing down.
Did you just drop a large block of wood?
Nice hocked a greenie on your car.
Genk.
And now it's going to be built down in Valencia, so they had to do a whole kind of thing, move all the kit down there, and there's no Eurostar that runs from Genk to Valencia, so it takes more than 2.5 hours. And that slowed things down as well. But 3 years is a long time. And it's finally ready. The version that we can buy now is going to be shown off at the show. They've announced prices and everything, so it really is going to happen. You will be able to buy one quite soon. In fact, you can buy one now because, well, last I checked, there was one on Auto Trader.
Really?
Well,
what? Is it a left-hand drive one?
Yeah. I was curious about this. It's a Ford Fusion, so it's a US one. It's left-hand drive. And it's a Cat D write-off, so it's some insurance salvage job. Presumably it had been nicked, and then they paid out and then found it again.
That was a long drive from Dearborn.
So what's going on here? Because I thought, now, is
US
this
car,
either?
it's over here. That's
well, I think so. There's two options here. First of all, it's a development car from Ford that's been nicked, but I think they'd want it back so they could crash it. Or
absolutely.
my other theory,
Military.
call me Poirot, military serviceman. It was on a Norfolk plate, so I thought
that's it.
a lot of air bases
American,
out in East Anglia. American servicemen's cars, been pinched. To double check.
Over cheap.
Yeah, exactly. They just get shipped over, possibly on a ship. I don't know, on a plane. I'm not sure.
Do you know what are the key differences? Are there any real differences between the Fusion and the Mondeo? I know they're built in different factories.
I don't know what's.
But they're more the same car than not the same car. That's a breakthrough, isn't it?
Yeah, they've got to be, otherwise all the economies of scale go out the window, and it doesn't make any sense. So I'd imagine that they are pretty much the same car.
Wonderful.
Just for avoidance of doubt, I emailed Ford and went, this
Fusion
Fusion is for sale on Auto Trader. Is it one of yours that's escaped? And they went, no, it's probably an American serviceman. And then I said, I'm going to buy it and then sell the story to Auto Express that I've driven the new Mondeo. and their PR man replied with, that would be funny. But I think secretly he was thinking, he wouldn't, would he? No, stupid. Of course he wouldn't.
Oh, blimey, the new issue of Auto Express is here. Oh, blooming heck and Mary Poppins! Some Herbert's reviewed the new Mondeo and it ain't even hatched yet. Right, let's see what they've got to say about it. Steering wheel impossible to reach from the driver's seat. Pedals miles away. Indicator stalk stuck over by the passenger door. For the love of God, it was left-hand drive! Or he was accidentally driving an Alpha. Sniff Petrol! With Gareth Jones on speed!
You know, I like a big car. And I'm quite fond of the MPV over the 4x4. I've always held this belief that smaller wheels makes it a much more functional vehicle. You have a lot more space inside. Now, the current Espace is an example. In fact, we can call it the old Espace because you can't even buy it in the UK anymore. Great example of a car with small wheels, big body. But there is a new Espace coming, but not to Britain, and it's got ruddy grey, massive wheels. Richard's got a picture of it here. They're about to announce it at Paris.
And it is a bit of a looker, actually.
It looks like an S-Max.
Yes, the top bit does.
Yeah.
But the glass house, the windows along the side are
Shallow.
The body sides are deep. The wheels look
Huge.
sodding enormous. I don't know how they've done that. They must be like 22s or something.
No, I think they're 2070, 450. They're massive.
Those, what, 20? What is
20, it's a new number. It's bigger than
I
anything.
see.
Yeah.
Gosh, well, that is big. It's
it's like a puppy with big feet, isn't it?
Well, all I can say is it's a really nice-looking car.
But we won't get it over here.
But they're not selling it in Britain. And I just think, well, now, what they've done here, because I remember when I was a kid, friends of my parents had an original Espace. I remember my parents were deeply envious of this because it was not only sort of rather unusual, but very practical as a family car in a way that no other car had been, because, you know, it was the first MPV in Europe. But also, it seemed rather posh. There was something quite upmarket about it, because they were quite expensive, so that automatically made them seem quite upmarket. But because it was
premium glass fibre,
but it was made out of, you know, the better stuff than Reliant were using, and so it sort of seemed upmarket. And I think the Espace in this country sort of punched above its weight. Renault's not normally seen as upmarket, but the Espace was.
Agreed. Yeah.
Now they're saying, they can't sell this new one here because it wouldn't sell because it'd be too sort of upscale.
I'd have it.
I don't know. I guess
a go.
Obviously, the market has constantly evolved. When the original Espace came out, it had this nature as a sort of middle-class prestige motor, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe there are too many other offerings in that area now for the Espace to be so competitive in the UK.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's true, actually. I suppose there's a lot. Back in those days, Merc made 3 saloon cars. BMW were the same.
Yeah.
And now Mercedes make 104 different shapes of car. BMW are getting there as well, and Audi. So if you have got disposable income or the favourable company car deal, you can get one of those, and it's sort of not so novel to have an MPV.
When I was a lad, the word crossover was a piece of electronics that you had in a speaker to separate the treble from the mid from the bass, and it doesn't mean that anymore. It means a car which has the stance of a 4x4 but not necessarily the equipment. Are all Espaces going to be 4x4, or are some of them going to be front wheel drive?
I don't know that any of them are going to be 4x4.
Oh, really? Are they?
I don't know. I was just trying to find out what this thing is based on. Oh yeah, there we go. Despite the crossover tag, the new Espace is front wheel drive only.
There you go.
Car magazine understands.
So why are they calling it a crossover?
Well, crossover is, I suppose, the way it looks, isn't it? It looks a bit like a 4x4, but it has the practicality of an MPV, and they're saying it'll have an engine like a 1.6 diesel in one version, so it looks like a big car with not a very big engine, but that's the modern way. There'll be a turbo on there somewhere, hopefully connected to the inlet manifold, and generally that's that sort of thing. If it's just connected to the radiator, it's going to be doing nothing. But I think that's the crossover bit, isn't it? It's mixing all of these desirable bits from different cars, but hopefully with fewer of the downsides. Yeah, it's a bit of a mashup. It is. It's the cassette boy of cars.
I wonder what the French word for crossover is, a direct translation of crossover.
I think it's le crossover.
Le crossover. Le weekend car.
Oh, because I don't know the real answer. Anyway, it's a hell of a nice looking thing. But I've just read here as well, as usual, never knowingly over research, but I'm reading while we're speaking, and they say it's not even been engineered for right hand drive. So
I can't believe that.
Even if people are standing at the Channel Tunnel shouting into it like an enormous megaphone, send us the Espace, Renault, you swines, it's not going to happen unless you want to sit on the other side of the car.
Alright, we've got to mention the new Jag, the XE. Now, we are very excited about it in Britain because all the press in Britain are very pro Jaguar.
Yeah,
that's
supporting the home team, yeah.
But here's the question, is the rest of Europe that bothered about this car? They've got some incredible target figures for what they're going to sell, haven't they?
I think their target figures are quite realistic.
80,000, was it?
They're saying, yes, that's right. They've gone bananas. No, those are the kind of numbers that Alfa Romeo is spitting out in a sort of slightly idiotic way. What are Alfa now? Alfa are supposed to be going to sell 400,000 cars by 2018. They currently sell about 75,000. So
yeah, I mean they're hoping for a kind of a massive return to form. They've got to do a lot to turn around.
And crucially, the new cars that Alfa Romeo will be showing at the Paris event this week, none. They're still working on the replacement for the 159, which has been out of production now for 3 years. Alpha's car range is 2, plus the 4C, which is so niche and expensive it doesn't count. Anyway, we digress. The Jag, I think they're saying that saloon production will peak at sort of 67,000 a year. And then there's going to be an estate, and that'll push it. I think they're saying the break-even point is they have to do 90,000 a year in its most successful year, which will be in a couple of years' time. And I don't know, this all sounds reasonable. You're thinking they're selling 500,000 3 Series or something like that a year.
And Jag have done a good job in recent years of putting out well-engineered, decently thought-through and really very good-looking cars. I think they're going in the right direction, so it doesn't seem that crazy that they're going to make those numbers.
Having said that, the XJ isn't jumping out of the showroom when you compare it to equivalent Mercedes and BMWs. Why would I'm really struggling with the names of these cars, the XE, be any different?
Well, I think they're going to push it like crazy. They probably need more dealers in more places. It's all right in the UK, but America's the big one. Now, the XE probably won't set the world on fire over there because it's a little too compact. But
a ladies' car
across Europe and around the world. But they've got some fairly serious intentions on that, and I think the main thing that differentiates Jaguar now from Jaguar in the past, and often British car makers generally, is they're actually spending proper money where it matters. They're also, more worryingly, is they're spending a lot of money on announcing that car. Did you see the online launch of the XE? Well, it was a real event.
No,
people died.
They spent some more money on their TV advertising. It's been relatively expensive.
That thing. See, but look, you saw that advert with the F-Type, that it's good to be bad, with those Hollywood British stars, and there was actually their Super Bowl advert, which in itself is extremely expensive to place an ad in the middle of the Super Bowl.
People look forward to the ads in Super Bowl.
It's like an American event in itself.
If you didn't witness the Jag XE launch, they flew a car down the Thames suspended underneath a helicopter. They had this enormous event. Was it at Riverside Studios? Where was it?
No, it was in Earl's Court.
Earl's Court?
Yeah.
Where Slade played shortly before Don Powell his accent in a bit. Anyway.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, well, any excuse. But it was like Les Mis or something, wasn't it? There was some great musical story thing going on. It was embarrassing.
It was bloody awful. It was like the worst Amdram performance of a thing written by, Tony. He's the treasurer of the Amdram group. Tony's written a thing. Tony's written a thing. It's okay. We'll all perform it. It was just woeful. And also, the hilarious thing was...
really expensive.
Yeah.
And
well, the rumour knocking around the car industry is that event cost them £7.5 million, just that thing. Now, flying the car...
we could have something really horrible for, what,
right, exactly.
Yeah, could have
do it for 60 grand and keep the rest. But the trouble is, the car itself, to me, looks very good. It's not dramatically different to an XF. It just looks like a sort of crisper XF. But I can see why they've done that. The segment that it's entering, the 3 Series C-Class Audi A4 world, is quite a conservative one. Even when BMW went super avant-garde and the 7 Series became very weird and all those crisp angle designs, if you notice the 3 Series didn't. It was the most conservative of all of that BMW era because they can't afford to scare people off.
Well, and you say it went weird, but it didn't go, for example, as weird as BMW went with the i8.
That's it. They would never make a 3 Series coupe that looked like an i8. Yeah. Too risky, too polarising. The 3 Series coupe is a very handsome but classically handsome car. It's meant to be populist and accessible because they have to sell hundreds of thousands of these, and Jag's not aiming for that yet, but they want to get there, and the only way they can do it is with a stout bedrock of a handsome but not radical car, and I think that's what they've got, and I think in the real life it'll probably look perfectly nice. But I heard people online going, it's a bit boring, isn't it? It's like, well...
It's the opposite of radical, that much is certain. It just looks like...
It's incremental, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're evolving.
You don't look at it and go, that's horrid. You look at it and go, well, that's a nice-looking car, yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah. Also, it makes sense. You would see it next to an XF and an XJ and even an F-Type, and you'd sort of go, OK, there's a family of cars.
Yeah.
And they all have that sort of understated, well-proportioned look that Jag has sort of got going on.
And unlike Aston's, you can actually tell them apart.
Yes, quite crucial that.
Yeah.
All right, we have 30 seconds each on what I think is possibly the biggest disappointment at this time at the Paris show, and that is the XC90. Now that we've seen the showroom version, having been shown that lovely concept estate that they did in the coupe, the new Volvo XC90, now that's boring. I was really disappointed. I think inside it's tremendous. I think outside it just looks too familiar. It's lost that air it was promised to have.
But it's so often disappointing when you move from the concept to the production versions of cars, particularly when they're new in any way. I mean, to me it seems quite rare that the production version really retains all of the stuff that blew your socks off when you saw it.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? And then car makers get flack. And actually, going back to Jag, that was the thing with the XF when it came out, because there was a concept version of that before, which had these very slim headlights. And I remember the original XF had those weird kind of, it looked like each headlight was wearing a monocle.
Yep.
And the reason was they couldn't do the thin headlights at that point. The technology didn't allow it. The concept, they could get away with it because it was all just made up. But they were so stung by the criticism of that, again, I'm going to say the word crossover, or le crossover as they say in France, and they did that crossover Jag concept, which is now going to become reality. It's on the same box of bits as the XE, I think, and it's coming out in next year, year after. And the concept of that, well, it looked like a production car. It even had normal door handles. And apparently they wanted to put the little pop-out F-type door handles on it, but somebody went, no, because if we do that, we can't do it in the production car, and people will have a go at us for promising something we couldn't deliver in production. So they're neurotic about over-promising with concepts. And I think the problem with Volvo is that, well, the concepts were coupes, weren't they? You're never going to make a 4x4 that's a coupe. And I think that XC90 is a really intelligent car, because if you look at the amount of window to the amount of door, it's a very glassy car.
It is.
And it's a family car, and kids want to see out. Look at the number of modern cars where the back door line and the rear window kicks up,
all the
and
time,
the kids get claustrophobia in the back. Volvo are too smart to do something silly like that, and there you go, you've got your XC90. Never going to be exciting, but I think it's a handsome thing.
I reserve the right to completely and utterly change my mind when I see it in the flesh, and as I'm not going to Paris, that's not going to be for a little while. I just wanted it to be so much more avant-garde than it actually was. Sorry. Dad?
Yes, Max?
For my 17th birthday, I want an iPhone.
What? But the other week you asked for driving a Formula 1 car.
Yeah, well, now I want an iPhone.
Well, you can't have one. I've already got you driving a Formula 1 car.
Don't want it.
You'll have it and you'll enjoy it.
Not fair.
I don't work all the hours in the day at my world of gravel for you to change your mind. Discussion over.
Fine. I drive the stupid F1 car, but I'm not hitting any apexes.
I never said you had to.
Gareth Jones on speed.
There's a new sexy Mercedes at Paris, and I'm really down on a lot of cars today, but I have to say I quite like the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT.
No.
No? What are they calling it?
They are calling it, this is officially what it's called, the Mercedes-AMG GT. No Benz.
No Benz?
If you were Mr. Benz and you weren't dead, you'd be going, hang on,
What's going
my
on here?
name's the only bit of that that's real. The Mercedes bit, that importer gentleman pulled that out of thin air from his daughter or whatever. AMG, they're fly-by-night newcomers. How dare you get rid of the Benz? But they have. It's just called Mercedes-AMG GT.
Poor car.
Next week, a séance to speak with Mr. Benz.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, get him on the phone. Or on the
Really?
get him on the Ouija.
They're dropping the Benz from this car? Are they going to roll that across?
No. This is just a thing. What they're trying to do is say that this is an AMG car because it was developed by AMG.
Yeah.
So it's Mercedes AMG rather... Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I like the look of it. I think it's tidy enough. I don't think it's as dramatic and as wonderful as the lovely SLS, which I've got a soft spot for.
Yes, but
It's beautifully refined.
I
The
think
way
it's-
they've subtly evolved some of the curves and the way things are rounded off in it. I think it's
Back end's
just,
nice, yeah.
I mean, obviously, I'm only looking at the press pictures. I haven't seen it in the flesh, but I think that's a real looker.
I think so. I think it's classically beautiful, quite rounded, what car designers call rounded forms. It's
And
just
I mean-
a pretty little thing, because it's an SLS underneath.
Shortened.
But
cut and
shortened,
crossed. Yeah.
so it's just, I don't know, the proportions
Sure
are terrific.
Yeah, and there are a lot of classical styling elements in there and parts of how you expect that. I was going to say at Benz, how you expect that AMG to look.
Yeah.
you've got to move things forward. Making something that beautiful is just not easy.
It's not. But the best people make it look easy.
Yeah.
That car sort of looks very natural. The front end's got a bit going on there, but generally I think it's quite simple and elegant, and it's nice.
No gull-wing doors?
Well, I mean, the gull-wing doors, yes, no. They're a good novelty act, but if you actually owned the car, I don't know. I quite like just getting in and out through a normal door. It's a nice bit of theatre, but sometimes
I'd
you
like to
don't
live
want
with
a bit of theatre.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to try living with gull-wing doors for a few months before I decided. I think. That,
it'd be nice.
I've
Do you know
got
what's
on very
interesting?
well with them in
well.
that particular car, very happily. I never thought that there were any sort of hindrance unless you're in a very, very low-ceilinged NCP car park. But,
but the car's so low, isn't it? There's probably not as much of a problem in that respect. But what's interesting is if you look at Mercedes' flagship sports car, the SLR, the McLaren one, was what, 300 and something thousand pounds? The SLS was 180 or thereabouts. This GT is 120 for the S. There's going to be a non-S coming as well, which will be sort of closer to 100 grand. It's like Mercedes' flagship is getting cheaper with every generation. It's extraordinary. And now a competitor for the 911 Turbo, I think, is the most logical rival on power and price.
So it'd be interesting to know actually how the sales numbers have gone for those subsequent generations.
Well, if the laws of economics are to be believed, you can draw it on a going right up.
Yeah,
but
they should
who
be. But
knows?
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Are they leaving room for some super ultra mega car that will sit way above where the SLS was and where indeed the McLaren SLR was? I wonder.
I don't know. I think Mercedes-AMG Super Mega Ultra car has a ring to it. And you should possibly trademark that before they do.
Easier to remember than Mercedes don't say Benz AMG.
I don't know how it's going to work in America as well, because people in America don't refer to a Merc, because Mercs are Mercuries. So they always say Benz if they're abbreviating.
Mercedes.
I mean, this is just marketing stuff, isn't it? People will say what they say. They'll call it what they feel like.
Yeah. The Americans always referring to Benz rather than Mercedes. The thing that nailed that fact in my mind was I'd been listening to Sir Mix-a-Lot this afternoon, Baby Got Back, and of course that refers to my Benz.
What does he rhyme it with? I can't remember. Or does he not? Boobs.
Let me think about that.
It's a half
No,
rhyme.
it's lower down.
So do you think,
Friends, that would rhyme.
do you think this new
sort of.
Mercedes AMG GT won't be driven by deep sea divers?
Because they've got the Benz.
Yeah. Now, Mercedes are also talking about a new little G-Wagon, aren't they? A baby G-Wagon, the GLB, is
Baby G, who did Let Me Be Your Fantasy. Again, marketing issues they may have to address. I think that's a while off yet. They did that concept last year.
It was gorgeous.
Yeah, it looked alright, didn't it? But I don't know.
I liked it.
Didn't do it for me.
Anyway, moving on to further up the alphabet, but only to M, Mazda.
MX-5. How exciting is
MX-5,
that?
or down the alphabet to MX-5. Well, good
Are
save.
you excited about the MX-5?
I am,
Because
yeah,
when we
fantastic.
mentioned it a minute ago, and you're like, oh yeah, this new MX-5.
And it's been around for, what, 25 years now. It's been a fabulous, iconic sports car, I think, in that time. It's not fancy. It's affordable, but it's so well executed. They just did a beautiful job of doing what they set out to do in the first place, to come out with a little Japanese version of your classic British sports car. They just did a beautiful job on it, and they've improved it, and now we've got a new generation coming out. Yeah. Of course, that's exciting.
If ever a car company put all their eggs in one basket,
And they took a
They-
huge punt on it because a guy called Bob Hall, who's an American car journalist actually, but he suggested it to someone at Mazda, and they went, Paul San, we think you're onto something here. Would you like to come and work with us on making this a reality? And this guy, who was in California, and they did a lot of design there, do you have a Lotus Elan or an MGB? And he sort of brought it along for all the engineers from Mazda came over and
make one of them that
tried it,
actually works.
Yes, exactly. It was basically, you see this oil leaking on the
Make
floor?
one, yeah. Now make it
Don't
work.
want that. Don't write that down. That's not good. But you know what they used to do as well? In the last generation, the new one is the fourth generation. The one that's just going is the third.
Yeah.
When that was a prototype, Ford and Mazda were all sort of one big happy family, and Richard Parry Jones, the boss of Ford Vehicle Dynamics,
Welsh boss of Ford.
well, here's the thing. So he wanted to make sure he signed off every car he was responsible for on his favourite roads in North Wales. So they had to crate up an MX-5 prototype in Japan and fly it to the UK and then have it shipped up to North Wales, where Richard Parry Jones has got a house up there, sort of sitting by, I can't remember, is it Bala or somewhere he lives?
Yeah.
And so that they could knock on the door. These Japanese engineers turning up and going, oh, Parry Jones-san, here it is, would you like to go? And he went and have a little drive around and came back and went, yeah, it's all right. And,
Good job he didn't have a place in Sandbad Pusquin. That would have really made it difficult.
They'd still be looking for it.
Yeah.
Those
poor people.
I was going to say, there's one thing about this new MX-5 I think is really interesting, is it's smaller and lighter than
Yes,
the old
well
one.
done for that. That's
Yeah.
a breakthrough, isn't it? The first time we've had a new generation of car that's actually smaller than the last since, I don't know, the Ford car?
That trend.
It's a trend that's growing and it's going to keep going. Certainly lightness, but also actually shrinking the dimensions. Just saying, well, we're going to make this as tiny as we can because then it'll feel more nimble and it'll just be more in keeping with the essence of the cars that inspired the original. So that all sounds terrific. And the engine, I think they've moved the engine even further back, so it's sort of behind the front axle line again. Very promising.
Sort of front mid-engine.
But the grille, they've got a bit of Honda S2000, is that what they call it, about it? Very much that sort of bottom feeder feel about it. Moving away from the original Land thing that it sort of borrowed so beautifully. Can you imagine the Lotus? How they must have felt. I know they brought the Elise out and did very well with it, but when they saw someone else doing something that was very much their IP to the letter, you could hear the sounds of people kicking their own backsides in Norfolk. Every time
Lotus had deliberately moved away from that. So it's their own silly fault.
And also, surely, but one of the reasons that Mazda were able to make such a success of the MX-5 was that they were able to combine having the right design approach and just basically designing the right thing with their manufacturing expertise and the number of factories they've got. Now, Lotus, different deal. Lotus always have to sort of go with the more innovative construction methods that they can make work with much smaller runs, much smaller numbers of cars.
The worst irony is that months after the MX-5, the original one came out in sort of late 89, I think, wasn't it? Just a few months later, the Lotus Elan came out, but they had been innovative. They'd gone, hey, it's 1990, let's be front-wheel drive. Let's give it this rather sort of avant-garde, stubby-bonneted thing, with a raft suspension technology to minimise torque steer and all this stuff.
And a Isuzu engine.
And a Isuzu engine, and it pretty much tanks, really. And the MX-5 went on to be a global hit, and you sort of think, actually, if Lotus had just gone, you know what we're going to do? We're going to just make a retro Elan for the modern age that's rear-wheel drive and light.
Ford, can we have your old Escort platform? We'll make that work.
We'll give it a really raughty little twin-cam engine, and we'll clean up. But they didn't. Mazda did instead. And history now shows us that Lotus is all cut adrift now. I don't know what they're up to. They're laying off people and talking about doing an SUV.
But hey, that will be a conversation on another programme. For I'm sorry, children, we're out of time, and it's now time for little children to go to sleep. So, nighty-night, Richard.
Good night.
Nighty-night, Zoc.
Good night.
And nighty-night, podcast listeners.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site, follow us on Twitter, or to find out about sponsorship opportunities, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed!